CardGamesTV Podcast. Ultra Instant Gameplay. Want to give it something, a cool name, right? So essentially, it's the idea of basically that you don't think too much when you play, right? It's the whole, just playing on instinct, as it were, right? Like kind of like an autopilot for when you play. Because I went to a locals tournament, and I can visually see my opponents shaking most of the time. Not like they were afraid of me or anything. It just obviously it was, they were really thinking hard on what they wanted to do, what kind of plays they want to make. Largely, I feel that the element of surprise was a factor. It is me, right? They don't know what I'm playing. They don't know what I'm gonna do. Right? I don't necessarily play meta, right? So the likelihood of them knowing what I can and can't do, what I will not do, is very they don't have that knowledge, right? So I have the element of surprise. Notice no one mentioned anything about super combos, right? To me at the event, like no one, no one pointed it out. Is what I'm saying. No one pointed out that they didn't notice, my super combos, right? So obviously, if they did ask, like, oh, I didn't see you draw any super combos. Oh, it's because I don't play none, right? I don't play none in my Zamasu deck. So that's why I don't have super combos. So like even that small detail, me not having super combo, makes the game a little bit different because of the fact that it's like, oh, he doesn't have super combos. That's different. Most people do. So they keep that in mind when they play. The fact that I don't have super combos changes, the possibility, right? It changes what they know to be true to now untrue. So then I create the uncertainty principle, right? I create the whole like, well, because he doesn't play super combos, what is he playing instead, right? What did he play in replacement of it? What could it be? Could it be more negates, right? Blocker, more unisons, right? Yeah, right? The usual. So, what could it be? And that inability to know what I have and what I don't have is a superpower in itself, right? It's an advantage that I have by default. Now, the more people get used to me, right, used to the way I play, then it becomes less powerful, right? The effectiveness starts wearing down of the element of surprise. Other factors is the way I play is that I tend to play a little fast, not super fast, right? But tend to play a little faster because I already know what I'm gonna do. I already know what I'm gonna do turn 1, turn 2, and so forth and so forth. So I can speed through my plays a lot faster because I already know what I'm gonna do before I do it. So I don't have to think about what I'm gonna do as much as my opponent probably has to. And all I have to do is focus. So it gives me the fact that I already know what I'm gonna do. It gives me more time to focus on what my opponent's doing, to look at what they're doing, try to predict what plays they might do, try to determine things, trying to figure out their strategy, what their win con possibly could be, and how I could circumvent it, that kind of stuff. So that way I can put more of my thoughts into figuring out how I'm going to beat my opponent, as opposed to just playing the game, right? Just like, okay, what am I going to charge? What order in which I'm going to attack? That's all predetermined. That's all pre-planned. That's the whole point. That's why you play test, for you as a player to get better. For you to be at the point where it's like, yeah, I already know what to do. I just instinctively do what I do. Right? I instinctively charge certain cards. I instinctively combo against certain types of attacks. I block certain types of attacks. I negate certain types of attacks, right? those types of factors. I check to see how many cards in my opponent's hand. I check to see how many cards are in their drop, and so forth and so forth, right? Periodically check their life to see, the current state of the game, right? Those small extra details is what I will focus on, because I don't have to focus on my hand and what I'm doing. I just got to focus on, my opponent. This also helps, to help circumvent cheating, for example, right? Because if you're paying attention to your opponent and you're not really paying attention to your board and your hand and stuff like that, you're not distracted by, what you're doing, you're able to focus and notice if your opponent is doing something right or wrong. So that's very helpful. It's not too different from like a real fight. A real fight, you don't want to be looking at your hands, making sure that they're in the right position, that you have your fist tight enough, right, so that we can hit hard, right? Making sure your stance, making sure your legs in the right position, so your balance, your center of gravity is nice and balanced. You're not worrying all about that. All that's instinctive. You're just doing that automatically. Your main focus is on what your opponent's doing. If your opponent's reaching for a knife or something, it's like, oh, good thing I'm paying attention, right? You don't want to be busy trying to look at your feet and make sure you're in the right position. Then when you look up, oh shit, he's about to stab me, right? You want to pay attention. So it's a lot like that. So that's the whole, idea of being, instinct, right? The whole idea of like, you don't want your focus to be anywhere else other than what your opponent's going to do, right? Because what your opponent does is, what they do, you gotta be able to react to it, right? Especially if you have responses. Especially if you play counterplays. I typically don't, because I'm trying to avoid, trying to do a lot of interactions. Plus, I've never been in a situation where I'm like, man, I wish I can stop them from playing that card. I have thought, of course, like, oh man, I wish they didn't play the card, but not like, oh man, I wish I could stop it. Like, I wish I had a counter for it. Like, now. For me, it's just like, oh, I wish they didn't play that card. That card's gonna be a problem, but it's part of the game. I like a challenge, so I'm gonna accept the challenge and do what I do. Oh my god, it was so much fun. Seeing some really good cards being played, and then get rid of them. That's one of my enjoyments when I play. It definitely showcases my level of skill, readiness, preparedness, whatever you want to call it, right? The fact that my opponent can put some really strong stuff on board, but then on my turn I can get rid of them, right? With ease. It's like I'm already ready to get rid of it. Like, oh, that's a cool, strong board you just built there. I was able to defend against the strong board. My turn, I got rid of your board, and I was able to apply pressure. That's nice. That's automatic. That's just an automatic reaction. Like, oh yeah, you played some of your best cards. Now it's my turn, and I got rid of your best cards, and I dealt you damage, and it's your turn. Like, that feels good to just be automatic. Like, that's just be normal. And that's the other thing, you want to play the game enough, especially if you're play test. You want to play test enough for you, not for the meta, not for matchups, right? Everybody always likes to focus on, oh, you play test for the meta, the matchups, and this, that, and the third. And when in reality, well, for me anyway, it works for me. To each their own. If the other method works for you, but what works for me is focusing on my deck, making sure that it does what I want it to do when I want it to do it. If I want to drop like a 4-cost card on turn 2, for example, because I might need a 4-drop with like a really awesome effect on turn 2, for example, then I need to make sure that my deck can do that. That can play the 4-drop on turn 2, for example. As opposed to like, worrying about, what kind of cards my opponent are playing, and do I have cards to counter, right, to combat what they got, right? I use this analogy. It's the concept, instead of me trying to be like, okay, one day somebody might pull up on me with a gun, so I might want to have a vest on, I might want to have my own gun. Like, instead of thinking that way, I'm like, okay, they pull up with a gun, depending which hand is in, and whether the hand, they got the the gun's pointing down to the ground, like they have the gun on their side and they're holding it, or if they're like pulling it up to put it to point it at me, and what can I do? Am I bigger than them? If I'm bigger than them and they're pulling a gun on me, I have a higher chance of being able to outpower them, right? So I can just grab the gun, and and since I'm bigger, I can probably lift them up, drop them, and take the gun away. So I have a higher chance with that, instead of trying to be prepared with body armor, my own gun, right? Having 911 on speed dial or some shit like that, like, having, mace on me. Like, instead of trying to have all these things for that one altercation, right, or that one situation, I'd rather have something more generic, right? I'd rather be like, oh, because I'm bigger, that could be my advantage. Because I'm ex-military, that could be my advantage. Because I know I have martial arts training, that could be my advantage. I've been in scenarios where people came with me with weapons, and I defended myself. So I have that experience. So it's not just training, but I also have experience with problematic situations like that. So all these things combined give me an advantage in a situation like that, where it seems like I'm at a disadvantage because my opponent has a gun and I don't. So I'm at a disadvantage, presumably. But that's the thing, the element of surprise. Surprise, you did not know that this is normal for me. It's normal for somebody to put my life in danger, right? So, and me being able to defend myself. I got a bullet in my left leg. Yeah, shit happens, right? But as you can see, I'm alive. So so that's the whole idea, is like, prepare yourself, right? Plan for the worst, hope for the best. That's what I tend to do. So I plan for the worst case scenarios. Worst case scenario, my opponent swarms the field, right? Plays a whole bunch of cards, a whole bunch of battle cards. They were swinging a lot. I negated some stuff. I blocked some stuff. I took some damage. I out-comboed some attacks. So I did my best to survive, right? But I'm in a bad situation right now because I just survived that turn, but barely, right? So then on my turn, it's like, okay, what can I do? Okay, I got 5 energy. I have Super Saiyan 4 Goku Protective Earth, and I can clear the board and have the Floodgate ability to reduce the clapback, the possibility of them reestablishing board and just finishing me off. So I have a higher chance of surviving in that situation. So that's why it's important to have something in that situation. So I am prepared for the possibility of my opponent having a strong board, right? My opponent going wide. So then I might have to deal with that. Sometimes there's scenarios where your opponent is going tall, right? Really strong cards, and how you're going to deal with that. Sometimes my solution, right? My response, what I do when it comes to strong attackers, I take it. I take it. I take the hits, right? Take the hits. Right? Take it like a man, right? I take the hits, right? So it's like, too strong. Not gonna waste time trying to out combo, negate this and that. Like, I just take it, right? If I can negate, obviously, ideally I want to negate, but if I can't negate because maybe I'm tapped out or something, or I'm just saving the negate for like maybe a potential finisher, like maybe like an overwhelm play and my opponent trying to overwhelm and finish me off, I'd rather save the negate for that, last attack, that kind of stuff. So that could be the reasons, logical reasons why I'm just taking these big hits, right? These big strong attacks. I've said it many times before, the idea of like, personally, I'm trying to, I have gotten away from the whole idea of comboing. I combo very little, especially at the tournament that I was in. I comboed very little. There was like very little times I comboed. A lot of times I was just taking the hits, and just plussing, right? Opponent was just adding cards to my hands. And so I had that advantage, and I was playing the set 2 Zamasu, so essentially I have 2 life bars, as it were, so I can take 6 damage and not be a problem. I could take 7 damage and not be a problem, because then I awaken and technically would gain 8 life after that, right? Technically, between 6 or 8 life, technically, because my deck becomes my life, right? So I essentially will recover after taking 7 damage. So I'm just plussing 7, and then I'm, gaining, my life back, as it were. Because now the game goes from dealing damage to milling me out, right? And so because of stuff like that, even just the fact that the leader that I'm playing also reduces a lot of decisions I have to make, right? So that way I'm just, doing things pretty basic. I don't have to like do two things at once, which is, I mean, not once, do two things, which is be able to go on the offense, but also on the defense. The fact that I'm playing a defensive leader, which is why I call it a defensive leader, like Hatchia, Boma, Zamasu, and stuff like that, leaders that, you don't really have to defend them as much because they already kind of can defend themselves. They're based off the idea of defense. So you don't have to defend them as much, so you can focus on more offense as opposed to defense. So you can go a couple turns with tapping out and not be a problem because you're playing a defensive leader as opposed to playing anything else. Any other leader, you're going to need to be able to keep your defenses up, right? Be able to go in, go off on the offense, but keep your defense up, right? It's the whole keep your guard up. But if your leader is a defensive leader, then your guard is always up, right? Your guard is always up, right? You got a shield, right? You got defense, your toughness, your defense is pretty high, right? You max out all your stats on defense by playing a defensive leader, so you can focus more on offense. You can play an aggro, of course, and being playing a defensive leader obviously helps against aggro decks, right? So it becomes anti-aggro in that regards, like Hatchiak, for example. And I definitely pointed out that Zamasu, set 2 Zamasu is essentially an anti-aggro type of leader because of the leader's awaken ability. So even if your opponent on turn 1 or 2, knocks you down to like, 2 or 1 life, the fact that you can just awaken and essentially gain life, right? And you can still play the game for like a couple more turns. You can definitely get to like turn 6 and turn 7 with that leader, even against an aggro deck. So regardless if your opponent's playing aggro or mid-range or a slower deck, if they're playing a slower deck, oh man, that's just you'll probably get to like turn 10 against a slower deck, right? With that leader. But against aggro, you definitely will be hitting turn 4, turn 5, turn 6. Not that hard with that leader, right? Because that's why we call it defensive leader, right? So little things like that, things that take away your need to think, right? To make moves and decisions and take actions in the game. The less you have to think about taking actions, you just do them because it's instinct, it's a reflex, right? Whatever you want to call it, is ideally what you want to be. You want to be at the point where it's just natural, right? Playing the game should be natural. Should be as natural as breathing air, right? Because ironically, right? So ironically, I tend to, it's hard for me to, play, right? And talk at the same time. So it's hard to play a game and do commentary at the same time because, I need to focus on my opponent, right? But ironically, when I was playing at the event, we were just back and forth. We were just talking, just like having a casual conversation while we were just playing. And like I said, it was like instinct. Like every move and every decision I made, was automatic. So I make a move and I talk. I make another move and I talk. And I make another move and I talk because I already know what I'm gonna do. The decisions were already made previously. Weeks in advance, years in advance. The decisions of what I'm gonna do, turn 1, turn 2, blah blah blah, was already predetermined. So I don't have to think of what I'm gonna do. I just gotta do, right? Just do, just do it. And then, I was able to just have a nice conversation back and forth. It got to a point where it's like, oh, I love the conversation, but we're running out of time. We really should focus, on playing the game, trying to finish that out, and then of course continue the conversation. Which was nice. Played out the game, finished off the game, and we continued our conversations. I was able to do a photo out with somebody. Somebody wanted to take a picture of me. I made sure they were able to get the picture after I played my game. And it was fun. It was great. Definitely enjoyed it. Definitely the kind of stuff that I want. That's what I expect when I go play. Competitively, is that there's people at high levels. I want to play the very best, as they say, right? I want to be among very skillful players that put a lot of time and effort to improve themselves as players, not just on having the best deck in the format type of thing, but actually be good at the game, good at decision making. Definitely need to improve, right, on the ultra instinct, right, the being more natural, because you don't want to be nervous, because the worst thing that can happen to you is you, like, for 2-3 months, let's say you were playing a certain deck and you were unbeatable, right, like you never lost, right, let's say that. But then you go to an event and suddenly you're shaking, you're nervous, you start second guessing yourself, so you start making misplays, and it's just the worst. Like me, I made like maybe 3, close to 4 misplays at the event, like 4 plays that weren't my best plays. I'm like, you know what, I made a mistake there. Oh, I made a mistake there. I can, but the thing is, like I said, it was only 4, right? 4 mistakes. Clearly, I played better. I played really good, obviously, at every other moment in the game. But those 4 mistakes, they do make a difference. They could literally be the determining factor if you win or lose. One of my misplays definitely was the reason I lost, was because I played my Super Saiyan 4 Vegeta, and once I dropped it, I saw on my opponent's side of the board that they actually have a blue unison when they originally had a black unison. They had this Goku Junior Saiyan Scion, and it had like a whole bunch of markers on it. But I forgot that he just replaced the unison with the Majin Buu unison. So now he has a blue unison. And I already knew he had the Gaisling Trunks in his hand because he added it from his energy to his hand previously through a card effect. So I knew he had it. He had Gaisling in his hand, but because he originally had a black unison, I knew he couldn't use it. But this is where paying attention comes in handy, right? So I already made my play. Like I already tapped and dropped the Vegeta, and Vegeta doesn't have the flex, so obviously that's a problem. But my Android 17 turn ties in my hand definitely does have the flex, and definitely will make a difference. And the goal was to try to get to turn 7 so I could play. So I'm here on turn 6, dropping this Vegeta, and then it gets Gaisling Trunks. I'm like, yep, you got that. So I'm like, I would not have made that play if I, remembered that you just played your blue unison. I would not have made that play. I would have played my unison instead. I would play my 5-drop Goku protecting the Earth unison, right, to get that auto, so that way I can increase my chances, and of course keep some energy up, because I did have some negates in my hand. Keep my energy up, so that way I can negate and survive my opponent's turn, right? And guarantee that on turn 7 I can drop Android 17 turn the ties. Plus, another thing is, ideally, because I mentioned this long ago, ideally, before you drop 17, right, before you get to turn 7 to drop 17, you typically would like to play Super Saiyan 4 Goku. So ideally, that was the ideal play anyway. So I was already on turn 6. Ideally, I should have just dropped my 5-drop unison and get that auto in, because not only do I need the auto, right, to get that extra turn to get to turn 7, I also need the -2 ability to bounce my opponent's board back to the hand, right? Because the idea is, on your turn, draw, right, play the 7th energy, trigger your unison's ability to remove the 2 markers, ignore and bury, bounce all your opponent's battle cards back to the hand, so that gets rid of any blockers that could potentially be there, stopping you from winning with Android 17 turn ties, right? And then the other factor is they don't have battle cards on board no more, right? They're in their hand now. So once you drop Android 17 turn ties, all those battle cards now will go back into the deck. So you kind of board wipe, right, at the same time as you're going to hand wipe. So you get 2 for the price of 1. So that's why ideally the best play should have been my unison. Instead, I played Vegeta and I got punished for it. And it's fair, right? Fair is fair. That's my bad. That's my mistake and lesson learned, right? Gotta keep that in mind. Let's see. Some other mistake. The other mistake was there was a play where I should have played, where I played my 5-drop unison, right, my Goku unison, instead of playing my 6-drop Vegeta, ramping up to 4 energy, right, swinging with Vegeta, Senzu Bean, so that way I'd be back at 5 energy, then play the 5-drop unison, and then I would have had that as an advantage. So I would have a 30k blocker, plus the auto would be on the unison, and then I would have 2 attacks. So that's the thing. I would have had 2 attacks. I would have had the 30k attack, well 35 with Senzu Bean of course, right? I would have had the 35k swing, which would have been important, and then the 15k swing from the unison plus my leader. So I would have had 3 attacks as opposed to just 2. So me not playing the 6 drop was the misplay. Because ideally I should have played it, attack, ramp, attack, Senzu Bean, technically ramp, right? Senzu Bean ramp so I can get back to 5 energy and then play the 5 drop and then go from there. And of course, I had turning tides in my hand, right? So on the following turn, I can, turn in the tides, right? So I would have the 5 drop already set up, right? And I will hopefully still have my Vegeta 30k, beater right there. Still have that, and then I turn in the tides. That's ideally what I should have done, and like I said, misplay, right? It happens. Because that was the more ideal play. That's the play I typically would do. That's the whole point. Is I when I have those 3 cards in my hand, I'm supposed to play that line of play: 6 drop, attack, Senzu Bean, then the 5 drop unison. That's what I'm supposed to do. But I didn't. I didn't do what I was supposed to do, what I normally would do, and that a lost opportunity for a really huge advantage. And that definitely could be a deciding factor between winning or losing, right? So let's see what else. Not much. Not that I can remember vividly, other than like those 2 specific scenarios, where it was my misplays, right? Me not making the best play at that moment in time was the deciding factor in that situation. I would have been in a much ideal situation if I made a different play. But that's the thing is, you learn, right? Memorize it, right? Make it part of who you are as a player, right? And make sure that next time, do the right thing, right? Next time, play the better play, right? Next time, ideally, try to make a habit, right? Instinctively, that whenever you want to play your 6 drop Vegeta, always look at your opponent's board. Make sure there is no blue unison, right? Because the funny thing is, I don't care about Charismatic Villain Frieza. It's God Sealing Trunks that I do care about. That becomes a problem because I still get a ramp if my opponent Charismatic Villain Frieza. So I don't care if they Frieza me when I play my Super Saiyan 4 Vegeta. It's when they God Sealing is when it's a problem. And only 2 times I can recall that I've been God Sealed. One time like on Untap, and another time obviously was at this event. So it's like, doesn't feel good to be God Sealed, but I could have avoided it. You know what I mean? But it happens. What else? Let's see. Oh, okay. Doing test hands. Like do a lot of test hands. Do more test hands than actual like playing against opponents, right? Because again, like I said, it's about your instincts, right? You want it to be a reflex. You want you shuffling your deck to be reflex, right? You drawing from your deck to be reflex, right? You want, when you charge stuff to be reflex, where you don't have to think about what you are and are not going to charge. I already have certain cards in my decks that are like dedicated energy. Like when I see them, yep, you're going into the energy area. I'm not keeping you in the hand. I'm not thinking or debating if I should keep you in my hand or not. Nope, you're definitely going to the energy area. So like Android 21 Bad Omen, always auto energy. What is it called? The field card, Tragedy Overground. That's automatic energy, and that's in my Zamasu deck. So that's automatic energy, and I have the 9 drop Zamasu that lets me play the field card from my energy or drop or deck. So if I have to play it from the energy area, I'll play it from the energy area. So that's why it's always dedicated energy, because I could always play it from the energy area if need be. In case I don't want to go from my deck, because I don't want to reduce my deck size, since my deck is my life. And if I, for some reason, I don't have a tragedy in the drop, I can always grab it from the energy, right? That kind of stuff. So it's always dedicated energy. Any extra copies of cards, obviously, it's energy, automatic energy. Unisons tend to be, obviously automatic energy, especially if I'm already playing a unison and that unison is on the field, it's been on the field for a while and it's putting in work. I'm not going to replace it anytime soon with another unison, so I might as well just charge my unisons. So typically that's what you'll see, a lot of my unisons, maybe some spicy tech. like Goku striving to be the best. I've charged that a couple times as energy in the first two game rounds that I played. But in round 3, that card was actually necessary, right? It was useful. Most importantly, I should say, was a useful card. I'm like, yep, time to play that little spice. It's actually useful against that matchup. So I'm not going to charge it. I'm actually going to play it, and I charge other things instead. So those types of factors. So that's why it's important, for you to practice, test hands, right? Do a lot of test handing, shuffle, draw, and practice mulliganing, right? Practice being able to, look at your hand real quick and know what you want to get rid of, what you want to keep. Typically, I tend to mulligan just 3 cards out my hand. So essentially 50% of my hand, I just mulligan. So 50% of my hand is cards I definitely want because I have plans, I have preset strategy of what I'm going to do with those cards. But the other half, I want it to be a little random. I'm like, I want a little bit of randomness. I don't want extra copies of cards. I want stuff different, so I tend to just mulligan off half my hand. So that's what I typically do. But in some scenarios, I'm like, yeah, I want to get a specific card. So in my game 3 game, instead of mulliganing 3 cards, I mulligan 4 cards instead. Because the idea is I wanted to increase my chances of getting my 2-drop Goku striving to be the best, which I did get, and it was obviously important. And obviously I dropped it on turn 2, and it was a big deal. Even my opponents reacted to the fact that I actually played it. It's like, oh man, you got it, damn. It's like, yep, that's a really good card. Even after the game, he was pointing out how important, and problematic that card was. Like, well, glad to hear that. Glad to hear that, the game was harder because of that card being in the deck, right? It was there. I put it to work. I made use of it. I took advantage of it, right? And, it's the best thing you do. And that's the whole idea of like being, good old Batman style prep work, right? Always gotta have your opponent's weaknesses all day, every day. That's why it's important to incorporate cards that ignore barrier in your decks. Play stuff that has barrier in your decks coming in. Definitely play stuff that has, deflect, right? Have some win cons, more than one. You want more than one win con in your deck. I had multiple win cons in my deck, but 17 Turning Tides definitely was the MVP. No surprise there, right? Was the MVP of the deck when it came to my a strategy. It's like yeah, I don't care. My opponent's drawing a lot of cards. I'm gonna just play Andrew 17 Turning Tides and just make that unimportant. And yeah, so. Very, very fun. I was able to. What's extra nice is because I was able to also try out in actual battle and actual, real time. Right, I was able to try out some different lines of play, some different, strategies. I'm trying to make a habit of after turn 2 try to be defensive. Typically, I don't try to be defensive until like maybe turn 4 or 5, but I'm trying to make a habit like, turn 1, turn 2, right? Don't worry about tapping out, but like turn 3 and above, try not to tap out. What I mean by that is that the idea is to try to make sure that turn 3 and above, I'm being defensive. So don't tap out to be offensive and have no defense. Is what I'm trying to say. That you can definitely get punished for that, especially if you're playing against an aggro deck. You get punished if you tap out on 3 energy and it's not defensive. See, paying 3 energy for a Radish Giant Force and it being a card you can attack with, uses ability to draw a card and restand at the end of the turn, and you can block with it twice on your opponent's turn, right? Because it has an auto and it's a blocker, and it has 3 markers, right? That's a defensive play. So I'm keeping my defense up. Even though I tapped out, I still have my defenses up. So I can attack and defend. So it's worth, tapping out for that. But if I had let's say I had a different unison that there was a 3-drop. Maybe it was a 3-drop dual attacker. So the best it is it's a sword. It's just a sword, double sword, right? Then me tapping out in that situation would be bad. That's why it would be ideal to turn 3, for example, to pay a 2-drop unison instead of a 3-drop unison. If all I'm gonna do is like just attack. If the unison is defensive, then yes, I can tap out 3, like a Radish Giant Force, for example. But if the unison is not very defensive, it's not like a Jiren where it has the ability to minus battle cards and stuff like that. So it could be defensive in that regard. So if it's nothing like that, I'll try not to play, try not to tap out on turn 3. I should at least try to keep 1 energy up for, you know, like a negate or maybe a 10k combo that I have to actually pay an energy for. So that's the thing I'm trying to get into the habit of, because typically I don't. You know, turn 3 I just tap out. You know, turn 4 and above is when I try to be more defensive. But now I'm trying to, you know, be more. So I'm trying to be more defensive mid game when I typically don't. When I'm close to late game, that's when I'm more defensive, obviously, right? Early game, not defensive. You know, so turn 1, turn 2, I'm not that defensive. I'm just straight offense. But turn 3 and 4, you know, typically turn 3, I'm still on the offense instead of defense. But I'm trying to get away from that habit. I'm trying to be more defensive on turn 3 and 4, and then go from there, right? It just increases my chance. It increases the chances of me still having a higher life total, you know, and it just makes it where I have a higher chance of getting to turn 5 and 6, for example, much better that way if I don't tap out on turn 3. So that's what I'm saying. Like, I'm noticing that pattern. Like, if I don't tap out on turn 3, and I try to make sure I'm playing defensive when I have 3 energy, then the chances of me getting to, like, you know, turn 5 and turn 6 tend to be a lot higher, right? Which is important. You always want to improve. So, you know, even me, you know, I still have room for improvement, as they say, right? So I'm always trying to improve, and whenever, you know, I improve, I get better, and then of course I share that knowledge with others, so that way they can improve, right? You know, why not, right? Master Roshi style, teach people, and hopefully this was helpful, and that's the end of the podcast.